Day 925 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 621,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,200 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, so 6 tanks, 21 APVs, and 31 artillery. Then headed to the map as overnight Russian drones were shot down over Gomel in Belarus. Explosions rocked the area around 1:30 AM, with local sources reporting that the downing of 2 Shahed drones, attack drones, had occurred. The Belarusian Air Force jets were scrambled and videos showed fiery trails from the falling UAVs. And there is indeed a certain irony in Belarus shooting down Russian drones within this war. And perhaps more importantly, Belarusian President Lukashenko is always on the escalation naming bandwagon on any concerns of a military nature when it comes to Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, or the NATO front. And yet, when Russian UAV drones with warheads critically enter Belarusian airspace, Belarus all of a sudden becomes eerily silent on the matter, where their airspace is being legitimately violated militarily. Hypocrisy, thy name is Belarus. And given that last year's leaked Kremlin documents that revealed Russia's plan to fully control Belarus by 2030, it is possible that Russia is deliberately testing Belarusian airspace, possibly under the pretense of a UAV navigation error. Then headed south on the map as early this morning as well, a naval drone attacked the Russian port city of Novorossiysk, resulting in a number of witnessed explosions. The port city, home to the crucial Russian Black Sea naval fleet, has also been the focus of previous attacks, as it is now, for all intents and purposes, Russia's new Black Sea Fleet HQ. Especially after the loss of the former HQ and the forced move of most of Russia's Black Sea Fleet out of Sevastopol in Crimea to this location. Now, for this latest event, we also saw footage of Russia's Black Sea Fleet destroying a Ukrainian naval drone, a single one there, but other than that, we don't actually have a great deal of information on this one yet, as Ukraine may be testing the waters on this latest incident, no pun intended. Then headed across into the eastern Donbas sector, starting out in Chasiv Yar, where after months of attacks, the operational needle hasn't really moved all that much for Russia on this front. In part due to an almost literal blockade by the natural surrounding high ground topography, with also of course the protection given by the canal at its east. Though it is always an active and sometimes fragile zone, with, in this case, continued reports of Russian forces using CS gas in their operations, which of course violates the Chemical Weapons Convention of 1993, to which both Russia and Ukraine are signatories. Even the Novichok incident in the UK some years back falls under that violated agreement. But as for the CS gas, Ukrainian positions are typically prepared and equipped for these events. But as for Russia's broken promises, it must be noted that they have a terrible track record for keeping agreements, with 9 out of the top 10 post-conflict agreements over the past 30 years, most of which relate to their own borders, just violated. And what's the 10th one, you might ask? Well, that remaining commitment is for the Charter for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, involving China, Russia, and various other countries from Central Asia. So, as you can see, Russia's track record for keeping peace agreements is not just questionable or even bad, it's actually atrocious. Then headed down on the map to the Pokrovsk direction, where although high-intensity battles are continuing to outplay in this area, the front lines have again remained unchanged in the past day. In fact, just a few hours ago, the Ukrainian army evacuated a captured Russian T-72 tank, as this latest trophy was abandoned by the Russians during an unsuccessful assault attempt. Then we head all the way to the north, where we see another example of the shortage of manpower for the Russian forces in Kursk, as one video and another telegram message was seen coming from a Russian inside of their own controlled territory, if we can call it that in this case, because they stated that there's no one at the checkpoints about 20 kilometers from the front lines of Kursk, which is roughly at this distance on the map, south of Lvov. And the sources also stated that Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups are moving around freely without encountering any resistance. So apparently the police and the Rosgvardia have left the checkpoints in the last day, which may have directly related to the evacuations in the region, but with nothing or no one to replace them. And although of course I would expect some trenches manned at some of the critical points, also south of Lvov, south of the highway, it would appear that the Russian army is still slow to get the helping hand they need in this area. And so it really is quite the stark contrast we see when there's abandoned checkpoints on one side, but then we have the offensive force restoring roundabouts in Kursk on the other side. And just to be clear, I'm talking about Ukraine restoring Russian roundabouts in Russia. And of course, all of this reminds me of the fleeing Chechen forces in this region from the recent past, where we had the Chechen forces who were effectively lying to the Russian MOD, saying that they had everything under control, all as a means to not negatively affect their mighty image of military strength, as they threw untrained and unprepared Russian non-Chechen soldiers to the front as a buffer between themselves and the AFU, leading to frontline collapses, and in turn not allowing for any real-time battlefield transparency for the Russian MOD. But even if they did have real-time information, I'm starting to wonder how much of an impact it would have had in any case. Ultimately, Chechnya's Akhmat unit or TikTok army largely existed as a unit sent to Kursk that was created for PR purposes. And to think, going back to May of 2023 when Kadyrov stated his TikTok army would or could take over from Prigozhin in the Donbas, I said at the time, please let that be the case, as it will be an embarrassing disaster. And then we skip forward to today, where the unfathomable loss of Russia's very own territory arguably occurred at the very hands of Kadyrov leadership, although he won't admit to that. Then we'll head across to some news for today, where it seems Ukraine continues to up their drone game with the development of something I'm sure we've all wondered about ever since the early months of drone warfare. And that is drones equipped with firearms. And specifically, what looks to be a Kalashnikov rifle from the barrel we see right there. So an AK-47. And so all of which means that it looks like the Ukrainian army is getting closer and closer to a viable solution on this front, and one that would account for, say, recoil management. Next, of course, would be further stabilization and accuracy as part of a workable targeting system. Perhaps also a bit of heat management thrown in, ammunition supply, and being big enough to provide a decent range. So the effective creation of such a platform is certainly within the realm of possibility, where the main constraint is within iterative development, as they seek to perfect these platforms more and more. Now, apart from the countless use cases you could find for this on the battlefield, I would expect this to be very handy against taking down Russian recon drones, so the observation drones. Because as current, Ukrainian drones, when taking out their Russian counterpart, directly lead into the drone, making for a detonation in a sort of a one-for-one takedown. But if you instead have these platforms just flying around, well, it could certainly put the odds in Ukraine's favor on that front. And certainly there will come the inevitable nail-biting time when these platforms will combine with completely autonomous AI systems to work to greater effect. Which means that the technological leader will reign supreme on this front, which is quite likely to be found in the technological superiority of Western chips, GPUs, and software. But if you worry about, say, China's technological prowess on this front, in terms of them being a supplier to Russia, the problem there would be that China is in fact some degrees of magnitude behind on this front in certain key technological areas, especially where CPUs and GPU manufacturing is concerned. There's other sanctioning concerns as well, but I digress because as for this latest hardware update, the developments are making strides with reports of some in-field usage already. Then in some more hardware news, Germany confirmed an order for a whopping 17 additional Iris-T air defense systems for Ukraine, adding to the 7 already delivered. Now, although the production and deployment of such systems is by no means a quick process, with Ukraine set to receive all units by 2026 in dribs and drabs, it's nonetheless an impressive mark of support. Then headed to some more news, as the red lines are back, as Russia's foreign ministry issued 2 warnings to NATO over potential authorization for Ukraine to launch long-range strikes on Russian territory. Spokeswoman for Russia's foreign ministry, Maria Zakharova, warned of immediate and extremely painful responses, accusing the West of ignoring the risks of escalation. Meanwhile, everybody's favorite foreign minister, Lavrov, also referenced Russia's red lines, advising not to joke about them, and also that America knows where those red lines are. So now I've seen it all, red lines about red lines, and yet here's the thing. Many in the West already thought they knew where Russia's red lines were. Then we saw the slow trickle in of weapons platforms to Ukraine, such as the HIMARS rocket systems, no red lines there. Western tanks, Challengers, Abrams, Leopards, no red lines there. ATACMS missiles, none there either. Or how about the F-16 jets, those red lines Russia spoke of as well? We couldn't find the red lines. But of course, realistically, we all know the true red lines. It's when one party to a conflict uses nukes, creating the counteracting red line being breached, where the other party to the conflict uses nukes. And yet, my biggest wonder out of all of this is, how long did it take the Kremlin to realize there were jokes about red lines? Because this started an awfully long time ago. Are they truly just playing catch up now with pop culture references? Then headed across to a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. As there was a recent scandal in Russia involving a fake Colombian national basketball team made up of non-professional players who suffered a humiliating defeat, including a 102-point loss. Then the official Colombian Basketball Federation came out of the woodworks, condemning the unauthorized use of its name and logo, stating it had never approved any participation, with legal action now being pursued by the Colombian Federation against those responsible for the deception. So is this really what Russia is doing now? I mean, to be fair, Russia's been cheating in international sporting events for quite some time. But in this particular instance, it'd be better for them to not even do it in the first place, faking an opposing team, as the blowback from the staged fakery, which is surely worse. Wow. When your country is so full of lies, they even fake national teams to play in your tournaments. And I'm sure the exposed event got no media coverage in Russia whatsoever, because that's our Russia. Lies on top of cover-ups on top of more lies. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Like I say, please continue to like, comment, subscribe. If not already, thanks for subscribing if you have. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!